This video will show you how to replace the left front axle seal on a Pontiac Grand Prix. This will be located on the driver's side of your transmission. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front end of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, remove all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts and we can get the wheel off of here. Now that we have the wheel out of position, we're going to focus on the center area here. This is where we can see our axle shaft and our axle nut. Use a 34mm to remove your axle nut. Now we're using a hammer and punch directly in the center of the axle shaft. We never like to hit on the axle with a hammer. You could cause damage to the threads. Once you have movement from there, we can continue on. To help prevent the rotor from coming off while we continue on removing our brake caliper, we're going to use a spacer and one of our original lug nuts to hold this in place. Now we have to push back our caliper piston. To easily push back our caliper piston, I'm using a small pry bar directly inside this port. I want to try to press up against my brake rotor inside there, and then I'm going to pull my caliper outward. This is going to push in our piston. Once you have some movement from there, we'll continue on the inboard side. Now as we look along the back side of the caliper, we're looking for our 2 15mm caliper bracket bolts. We have one up high and one just below it. I'm going to remove the first mounting bolt, give it a quick inspection, but start it in a couple threads. That'll help prevent the caliper from falling while we continue on to the next mounting bolt. Now we're holding on to the caliper while we remove that mounting bolt. Now we can slide the caliper out of place. Once you have it out of position, thoroughly inspect your brake pads. If it looks like they're worn at an angle or damaged in any way, you're going to want to replace them. These look good, so I'm going to hang this aside, putting no pressure on the flex hose. For this, I just have a hook. You can use pretty much anything. And then I'll just put it up along my coil spring. The next thing I'll do is remove my brake rotor. We want to make sure it does not fall off. We're holding on to it while we remove our lug nut and our spacer. Set that aside. Now we're paying attention where our steering knuckle connects to the lower portion of our front strut. You have a 21mm mounting nut for each one of the mounting bolts that make their way through this area. I'm just going to start this back on here a couple threads. Now we're going to have to use a hammer. We're going to tap on this end. We'll have to drive this out. This mounting bolt has splines holding it in position. Let's leave that in this position and continue on to the next. Now when we go to remove our mounting bolt, you may find that the knuckle will want to pull away from the front strut, out and away. Just be aware of that so you don't get hurt. When we do pull this out and away, we also need to press our axle in through the wheel bearing and through the knuckle. We're going to pull it out in this direction here. Now we can slide this out of the front strut. We're pushing the axle out and through and sliding it out the back side. Now, to remove the axle from the transmission, I like to use a safety strap around the axle shaft, and I'm going to go up to my front strut. That'll help prevent this from falling and potentially getting damaged or hurting you. Use a bungee cord if necessary. I have a collection receptacle underneath the area where my axle seal is, so when we do remove the axle, if fluid does come out, it's going to get collected and we're going to recycle it properly. To remove this front axle, I'm just using a long pry bar. I'm going to carefully make my way in and behind the axle, and I'm going to pry it outward. Now, once you have it so it's broken free from inside of the transmission, we can carefully slide it out of place. You can remove your safety strap while doing so. Remove that safety strap. Now, as we remove the axle, we don't want to pull from the outboard side. We could potentially cause damage to either of the joints. We have to reach deep inside. We're going to take hold of the inboard side of the axle, remove it from the transmission. As I mentioned, fluid may come out of this area. Just a quick inspection of that axle and we'll set it aside. Now that exposes our axle seal. Prior to removing that, I'm just going to clean down the area with a clean rag. I'm not using any detergents. I don't want anything making its way inside of the transmission. Now we can start removing the axle seal from the transmission. The axle seal has a flanged area. I want to try to get underneath the lip here and then gently start prying this out and away from the transmission, being extremely careful not to cause any damage to my transmission. Now at this point, I have this broken free away from the transmission. It's peened in a little bit. I'm going to continue on with my seal removal tool. I'm going to pry in this area that I just peened inward. As you can see, fluid is coming out just as I mentioned. And there's our seal. Now, prior to installing any brand new part, of course, we want to make sure we clean and inspect our mounting area. So we're looking in the area that we just removed our original seal from. We're going to clean this port. I'm using a clean rag, no detergents. Just as before, I don't want anything making its way inside of my transmission. Now let's prepare our brand new seal for installation. In the center, I always like to use some lubricant. Prior to doing that, we want to make sure that we turn the seal so we can look where it would go into the transmission. We need to add sealant here. We're going to use oil-resistant sealant for this. Now I'm just going to squeeze out a tiny bit here, and then I'm going to spread it around with a gloved finger. Just going all the way around the entire seal. Just a nice thin coating. That's going to help prevent any transmission fluid leaks. After applying the sealant there, we're looking at that center rubber ring. That's the seal for around the axle. We'll just apply some lubricant. Let's get this in place. Now let's bring this in towards the transmission. We'll rest it in place. Now at this point, we have to continue on pressing this in all the way until it's flush with the transmission. You can use an axle seal installer, or you can use a large axle nut socket. I'm using an 1 15/16 socket with an extension and a hammer so I can tap this into position. Now at this point, I'm just feeling all the way around my axle seal, confirming that it is properly seated all the way around. If it's sticking out in any place, just continue on tapping it in. It needs to be properly sealed. After that, just go ahead and clean any mess in this area, and once again, do not use any type of detergent. Let's get ready to install our front axle. Let's have a quick look at our axle. We're looking at the area that goes into the transmission. Now, if you had an issue with the seal, it could potentially be because of the axle itself, so we do want to make sure there isn't any damage or odd wear. Looking all the way around this. That looks good. Let's slide this in. Now, when we bring the axle over to being in position, we're looking at this shaft here. You can see that it does have splines. We need to make sure the axle splines align with that. It also has a lock ring. Once we have the axle in place, we need to take hold of the inboard portion of the axle and attempt to remove it. It should not slide out of place. Now I'm going to reach in deep into this area, just as I mentioned. We'll hold on to the axle and attempt to remove it from the transmission. Now we've already cleaned the area, but sometimes you might still see a drip, so go ahead and clean any mess you might happen to see. Now we're focusing along the outboard side of the axle. We have a splined portion. These splines go into the back side of the wheel bearing. I like to use some anti-seize. This will help as a lubricant, but it also helps make sure that we can get this out in the future if necessary. Now we're going to take the axle and we can bring it into the back side of the wheel bearing. We'll just gently flex it as necessary. This is going to go into the wheel bearing and out through the far side. We'll be pressing the knuckle up towards our front strut assembly. We'll align this area, slide our mounting bolts through from the front towards the rear. As I mentioned, those bolts do have splines. We will have to tap them into position using a hammer. To continue on, bringing these in and through, you can start the nuts on. And now we're going to bottom these out prior to torquing them. Now the torque for each of these bolts is 89 foot-pounds. Now we're looking at our wheel bearing hub mating surface. We need to clean this area down and apply some anti-seize. We'll use a wire brush in between the studs and the center of the hub. A quick rinse. And some anti-seize. Now let's have a look at our brake rotor. We're looking at the inboard side, specifically the center, which would rest up against our wheel bearing hub mating surface. Clean that area down as well. Slide our brake rotor on there. Of course, we're going to hold it in place using a small spacer and one of my lug nuts. That'll prevent that from falling off. Let's continue on to our caliper next. Now, when we go to bring the caliper into place, we need to pay attention to our flex hose. We want to make sure we do not twist it in a way that might restrict brake fluid flow. We'll slide it over the brake rotor and continue on the inboard side with our 2 caliper bracket bolts. For each of our 2 caliper bracket bolts, we're going to start them in, snug them up, and then torque them to 133 foot-pounds. Now it's time to install the axle nut. When you go to install this, you may find that this wants to spin on you. To help prevent that from spinning, we can use a small screwdriver inside of the fins up against the caliper. Slide it straight in there. Now we can spin this while holding pressure. We can continue on with our axle nut. As far as the axle nut, we're starting it on by hand. We're going to tighten this up using a hand tool. We never want to use an impact tool because if you were to over tighten the nut, you could potentially cause damage to your bearing. Now that I have it bottomed out by hand, I'm torquing it to 118 foot-pounds. The axle nut's torqued. We can remove this and remove our lug nut and spacer. Now one last quick inspection in this area and we can reinstall our wheel. Let's reinstall our wheel. Start on all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts. Once you have them all started on, snug them up. We'll get the wheel back on the ground and then torque each lug nut to 100 foot-pounds. Now that I have the wheel back on the ground, I'm going to be torquing each one of my lug nuts to that 100 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Okay friends, now the next thing we have to do is make our way up inside the passenger compartment and pump up the brake pedal. Make sure it's firm. After that, make your way under the hood. We're going to top off our transmission fluid. Now once you've pumped up the brake pedal, the next thing we have to do is check our transmission fluid level. To do this, you'd want to have the vehicle running on a flat level surface. You're going to remove your transmission dipstick. I'll do that real quick here. Let's just have a quick look at the end here. Now right where my thumb is, we can see this hatched area. We want to make sure our fluid level is up to the top of the hatched area. It could be low. If it is, we want to make sure we add some. If you do need to top some off, you make sure you use a funnel and use Dextron 6 fluid. Okay, so I finished adding that. Now of course I'm going to remove my funnel. I don't want to spill any of that transmission fluid. Now at this point, you'd want to run the vehicle on a flat level surface. Let it get up to normal operating temperature. While it's getting up to temperature, while you're inside of the passenger compartment with your foot on the brake pedal and the vehicle's running, you're going to run it through all of the gears, pausing for approximately 3 to 5 seconds in each one of the gears, from park into reverse, reverse into neutral, and so on. Make your way throughout the entire gear range several times. That's going to ensure that the fluid circulates throughout the entire transmission as it needs to be. Once we're up to normal operating temperature, we can check our transmission fluid level. Okay, so I have the vehicle running. We're up to normal operating temperature. Let's check that fluid level. Now we're looking at the hatched area. As you can tell, my transmission fluid level is at the perfect level. If you are a little low, you want to add some. If for some reason you added too much and you're above the hatches, you need to carefully remove some. This transmission level is perfect, so I'm going to reinstall my dipstick. Make sure that's secured in place so no moisture or debris make its way inside of your transmission. Okay, so we checked our transmission fluid level. We've already pumped up our brake pedal. We need to double check for leaks, take the vehicle for a road test, and make sure you get yourself a four-wheel alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.